Hi, my name is Pastor Hal York, and welcome to Truth in the Trenches. Today we're going to be in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 14. Bad bed, says the buyer, but when he goes his way, then he boasts. If you traveled much, you have probably had to barter to purchase an item. Maybe it's food or clothing or whatever. In many countries, bartering is the preferred way of doing business. Now, some people enjoy it, some people hate it. And yes, it can be very confrontational at times. The bartering process can get quite heated at times. And so some people are good at it, and some are not so good at it. But what the writer of Proverbs is doing is preparing his son or daughter for some of the realities that take place in such an economy, and I think some of the things he needs to avoid and be careful of. And he's talking here as the buyer. And what the buyer might say in such a transaction. Bad, bad, says the buyer. If you're purchasing something, then you want the person you're buying it from to think this what they're selling is of very little quality, very little value, hoping to get a better deal. You're basically saying it's not worth what you're asking. So you suggest a really low price, and they may laugh and say, I can't sell this for that. Well, you tell them you can get the same thing down the street for much less, and you suggest maybe a little higher price, but certainly lower than their original price. And so back and forth it goes, and it can take a long time sometimes. But the buyer knows it's probably worth more than the seller's asking for it, but he will never agree to that price. So he says, bad, bad, and then he starts to walk away. But suddenly, the price is right. The seller says, okay, I'll sell it for what you want. But after the buyer gets this thing, he goes around the corner with a big grin on his face, and he can't believe how little he paid for something he knows is worth a whole lot more than what he paid for it. It wasn't bad. He was just saying that so he could get a lower price and trying to deceive the seller. The bargaining words of the buyer are empty. They're only a strategy for negotiation. So my question I'm putting before you is, should Christians sell and barter like this? Now, I don't have a definitive answer for that. Sometimes you don't have much choice. But I do think we must be honest. Not applying things we know that aren't true. It's not bad. If it's not bad, don't say it's bad. It may be overpriced, yes, and we can haggle a bit. But to try to bilk someone out of money that is rightfully theirs using deceit and manipulation and false accusations is not right. Trying to deceive people of money that is rightfully theirs by lying is wrong. Is that how believers should use their words? Is the only thing that matters in the transaction me and the great deal I made? Is it really just all about the art of the deal? What about the livelihood of the person selling the item? Don't they have a right to make a living for their family? Don't they have a right to make a reasonable profit on what they are selling, or maybe something they've made? Turn the tables a minute, and so let's look at it this way. Now it's the seller doing the talking. He's saying to you, good, good. It's a one-of-a-kind antique. And if you believe him because he seems like an honest guy and you give him the money, afterward he goes around the corner chuckling to himself saying, I can't believe I just sold that piece of junk for that much money. And you're probably thinking, well, that's terrible. But I think that it sounds worse when it's the seller, doesn't it? Not so much when it's the buyer. But in our culture today, we might call these people scammers, people who prey on senior citizens, the innocent or the naive, trying to get them to buy something that in many cases doesn't even exist. If you go to a garage sale and see a good deal, buy it. That's great. But if you need to barter, remember who you are. And remember who's watching. Maybe it's your kids. But most importantly, the Lord is watching and he's listening to you. If you go and think something is overpriced, make them an offer you think is fair. If they say no, then don't buy it. But we need to be honest and truthful in our words and in our transactions with others. Notice what else we learn in this proverb. The proverb reminds us that what people say isn't always what they believe. It's very true, isn't it? What people say isn't always what they believe. They say bad, bad, but they really believe it's good, good. This Proverbs reminds us that we as believers shouldn't be. We shouldn't be deceitful. We shouldn't be dishonest, and we shouldn't brag about it. We need to consider others, not just ourselves. We need to speak the truth. We shouldn't use our words to deceive or to manipulate. In North America, we are faced with this less than in many other countries, but the principles set forth in this verse can certainly apply to how we buy and sell and how we use our words. Our words should reflect who we are and what we believe. We see also the principle of esteeming others as well. But having said all that, let me give you a golden rule to guide us in such things. It's simply this, and you've heard it many, many times. It's in Scripture. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. May this truth guide us in the trenches as we seek to live our lives for the glory of God and the good of others. May God bless.